Good afternoon, everyone. This is Bobbie Wunsch from the Pacific Health Consulting Group, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the last in our series of CBAS stakeholder discussions, ending today with a stakeholder summary webinar. So thank you all for being here. I want to make sure that you know that participating in our webinar today are a number of members of the Department of Healthcare Services staff and the California Department of Aging staff, including John Shen and Jeannie Smalley from the Department of Healthcare Services, and Ed Long, Denise Peach, and Director Laura Conley from the California Department of Aging, as well as many members of our work group who will comment various sections around the webinar issues. So let me begin first by giving a big thank you and calling out the tremendous commitment of the SCAN Foundation for sponsoring the CBAS stakeholder process and for continuing to focus on issues affecting many, many people in the state of California. So special thanks to Lisa Sugarman and all the members of the SCAN Foundation. Let's take a minute and review the agenda for today and what we have planned so you'll know what's ahead. First of all, we're going to spend a few minutes reviewing the stakeholder activities that have been taking place since October of 2013. Then we'll have a review with the DHCS and CDA staff of the recommendations made by the work group and the future efforts that will continue after this series of work is completed. Then we'll review the waiver comment process and the timeline moving forward. We'll have time for comments as well as any questions that people listening in to the webinar today have. And then the departments will review the next steps and how we will proceed from here. So for everyone that's on the call, everyone is in silent mode except for several members of our work group who will be making comments throughout the process. We'll then open at certain times the lines of all of our stakeholder work group members so that they can make any comments that they'd like. And then if you are a member of the public and we're not on the work group, please write into the comment box any questions or comments that you'd like to have identified or read later in the meeting once we get to the public comment period. So let's get started now, and just as a quick review are the objectives for our webinar today. Again, we're going to review the stakeholder process activities, the recommendations that the stakeholder work group worked on, future efforts that are going to be undertaken to continue this process, and then the waiver timeline and process. And then, of course, we'll have next steps and we'll have comments from the stakeholders. Okay, so let me begin by summarizing the work of the stakeholder group, the CBAS stakeholder group, which began in October of 2013. And as you can see from this slide, we began, some of you may remember, on October 23rd of 2013 with the kickoff webinar for this stakeholder process. And you'll probably remember it because you got an email a few minutes before the webinar started telling you that the webinar system had gone down and the webinar was becoming a conference call instead of a webinar. Certainly the staff at DHCS and CDA will never forget that moment of technological failure. Then, starting in December, we've had 4 in-person stakeholder work group meetings, telecast also by conference call and webinar. And those meetings happened on December 3rd, January 9th, February 4th, and March 16th. They happened late in the afternoon so that providers could attend the meeting or listen in after their centers were closed. And we had very active participation by the work group members, many of whom worked in between meetings in subcommittees, and finishing off this process of meetings with today's webinar to review the summary of the activities and the recommendations of the stakeholder process. The stakeholder process was a robust group. If you want to go on to the next slide. Managed care plans participated in the stakeholder process, CBAS providers, advocates and consumers, ledge staff, and members of the California Department of Aging and the Department of Healthcare Services. There were 20 work group members in all, and we had at least 3/4 of the work group members in attendance in person in Sacramento at each meeting, and several additional on the telephone during the process. Let's just review quickly how the process worked and how the work group members dug into the information that was presented and offered their expertise. So as I mentioned, the work group members, the 20 work group members, not only attended the official 4 work group meetings, but worked in between those meetings on subcommittees. And in between the first and second meeting and the second and third meeting, the subcommittees looked very carefully at the STCs from the waiver and the standards of participation for CBAS, and made comments on all of these issues that were then discussed at each meeting. Other interested parties attended in person or by phone and provided input through the comment period and through the comments both during the meeting and after the meeting. DHCS and CDA posted all of the agendas and meeting materials prior to each meeting, and then after each meeting, DHCS and CDA posted meeting summaries and cataloged all the stakeholder input that was received so that it could be reported at each work group meeting. And as many of you who participated remember, that at the beginning of each work group meeting, stakeholder input was reviewed and commented on by both DHCS and CDA as well as members of the work group. DHCS and CDA also provided updates at the quarterly Olmstead Advisory Committee meetings, and the work group continued to make recommendations not just on the waiver amendment, but on future CBAS initiatives, which we're going to talk about today later in the webinar. After today's webinar, DHCS and CDA will continue to keep stakeholders informed about the process that the recommendations will go through and the progress of the waiver amendment as it proceeds through the process with CMS. So let me just stop there and ask some of our work group members to comment on the process and to give you just a little flavor from their own perspectives of how the work group process and the activities that the work group members participated in unfolded. And we have Lydia, Celine, Pam, and Nina, who were active work group members. And I wonder if I could start by asking Lydia to make a comment or two about the work group process. Lydia? Let's see, Lydia, we can't hear you. So let's see if we can hear Celine. Celine? Nina?
So
Pam?
We show everybody as having their line open except for Pam. So we're not sure what's going on, so we're looking into it right this moment.
Okay, if everyone could just hold on for 1 minute. We're just having a little technical glitch here. Our work group members are on the line and their phones are unmuted, but we can't hear them. And so we're just checking to see.
Hi,
what is...
Hi. Someone me? This is Nina Nolcock.
Oh, good. Hi, Nina. Thank you for chiming in here. It'd be great if you'd like to make a few comments about the stakeholder process itself and your perspective and reflections on it.
Well, I think that first and foremost, I want to say that I was honored and privileged to be part of the work group, and that it felt really good to be in such a different climate, working with the state, looking at the CBAS program, the things that are working, the things that were not working, and so I felt like nothing was off the table. That's what I was told from the beginning, and that's how I felt. And so I really appreciated it. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. There was a little background noise for a moment, Nina, but go ahead. Sorry for the interruption.
That's okay. So just the entire process, and then breaking it down because it seems so overwhelming. I think I was also very appreciative of how Denise and CDA broke down the STCs and the SOPs, did the comparison so that we were able to take a look at them in some type of way that allowed us to kind of identify how they related to each other and which ones were interactive, if you will, in between the STCs and the SOPs. And so it was, I was very excited to be part of the process.
Well, it was great to have you as part of the process, Nina. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that. Let's see, Celine, is your line open? Celine? Lydia?
Bobbie, we show them still as open. We're not sure what the technical problem is right at the moment.
Hi, Bobbie, can you hear me now? This is Lydia.
Yes, hi, Lydia. We can certainly hear you now.
Hooray.
Great.
Hooray,
Yay.
hooray. Hey.
Thank you. Love to hear from you now.
You're welcome. Well, let me just join Nina in thanking you, Bobbie, personally for facilitating this process, and Denise and staff, John and staff, Jeannie, and everyone who worked behind the scenes. This was, I think, one of the best stakeholder processes I've been involved in, and I've been involved in many with the state. It might be because adult day health care CBAS is so near and dear to my heart, but I think it also had a lot to do with what Nina described. There was really a collegiality and a willingness to listen on behalf of the state personnel who were there and really allow any of our concerns, questions, and issues to be out on the table and addressed. And we came into this fully understanding that this work group was advisory only, and that finally an ultimate decision would be made by CMS and state staff in the production of the final STCs and the standards of participation. But I did feel that our concerns and wishes were understood, and I look forward to working with this same team and perhaps others on further concerns and issues that were raised that just cannot be addressed during this process, this immediate process, because of the tight time constraints. But I just want to echo Nina's words and thank you for allowing me to participate on this call today.
Well, thank you both. It was, of course, great to have you in the work group and the expertise that you both brought. Celine Regalia, are you able to be heard?
Can you hear me now?
We can. Great. Hi.
Okay. I said I was unmuted, but I wasn't sure. Likewise, I mean, it was a really exciting to be part of this process and to be able to have, to be able to have a really transparent process where people were able to openly voice concerns, and those concerns were really reflected. And I think the exciting thing is, like Lydia says, there's things that we were able to address immediately, but there's also the hope that we'll be able to continue to work on these issues as this process evolves.
Well, thanks, Celine, and I hope you and Lydia and Nina will continue to make comments throughout the webinar. I wonder if we've been able to connect to Pam Moakler from Care First, one of the health plans that's been actively involved in this stakeholder process, so that we could hear from Pam.
Can you hear me?
We can. Wonderful.
Hi. Okay. All right. We pulled this off on an iPad. Hi. I just want to say on behalf of both Beverly Gibbs and myself from Care First that we thought this work group was an extremely positive experience for us. We had, you know, it was kind of a lot happened very quickly with CBAS facilities all coming on board, and for the listeners, we have CBAS facilities contracted with us in both LA and San Diego counties, so we have a large number, probably almost 150 in LA County, and I think it's 17 in San Diego. But it really provided an opportunity for us to discuss, you know, with a group of folks who have different perspectives, what's involved in the CBAS that, you know, I think we learned things that the CBAS facilities were doing that we weren't aware of. So for us, it, you know, it identified for us things that we need to do as a plan in terms of, you know, establishing specific reporting requirements, making sure that we have regular and ongoing communication with the facilities, and also, as we had spoken about at these meetings, that we really think we need to do more around performance measures. But we've walked away from this process very excited about this benefit that is available to our members, and I think that now that the CCI is in full swing, that the CBAS centers are going to see, you know, more activity as we take on more responsibility for the LTSS of our members. So it was very positive, and we appreciated the opportunity to participate, and I know I personally learned a lot from the process that I think that is going to be helpful for the plan and our members.
Great, Pam. Thanks so much for your comments. And again, I think for those who participated in this process, there was really an open dialogue between the providers and the health plans, and that really, I think, has begun and opened up a very rich and robust conversation that we all know will continue. So I want to move now to hearing from DHCS and CDA and really having them walk us through a summary of the recommendations that the work group has made and an identification of future initiatives that the members of the stakeholder work group have recommended be undertaken now that this process has come to a conclusion. So let's hear from Denise Peach from CDA and Jeannie Smalley from the Department of Healthcare Services. Denise and Jeannie?
Great. Thank you, Bobbie. I think we'll get it started, and then certainly everybody's welcome to chime in on this discussion, the work group members that are on the phone, as well as my colleagues here. So first we'll start with just sort of a big picture. The work group put forward, we sort of distilled things down to 18 main recommendations. There were lots of recommendations on the work tools that we provided that Nina was mentioning, from the very small to the very large, but we put together a summary document that captured the 18 main recommendations that really represent the work product of this work group. So summarized here in this document, the CBAS Stakeholder Work Group Recommendation Summary, there's a link there, and we'll click on it really quick and just show you this is a document that's posted on the CDA website for those of you who haven't been visiting our stakeholder website very often and checking in. It provides a summary of the main recommendations and essentially where it was in the documents, where the references are, and what the theme is, and whether there was general concurrence from the staff here from CDA and DHCS on the concept that we were going to be putting forward, and then some additional comments on the document. So I just wanted to show you that this link can take you to some more in-depth about what we're going to summarize today, but I think it captures pretty well what it is that, that the work group has put forward. So also there's a link there for the future initiatives that the work group covered during the last 4 meetings, and that document is also posted on the CDA website under the stakeholders tabs. And available at that link, and it summarizes some of the things that we had said during the the course of the meetings that we would have to put sort of in the parking lot, or that we were going to need to do further development on because they went outside of the sort of purview of the waiver discussion, but we wanted to flag them and identify them for the time when we can roll up our sleeves after we've got the waiver amendment draft together and off to CMS, and we have time to start working on these things that we know also need to be developed. So that list is up there again for more detail. There's some information in the slides that sort of summarizes them, but when you want to look at these documents more in depth, if you haven't been following along, you can click those links and take a look at them there. So on the next slide, we start getting into the some of the recommendations in detail. These are those 18 recommendations that we talked about. And again, people can jump in as we talk. Delete the obsolete provisions related to the ADHC-to-CBAS transition. So that's a catch-all for something that we knew was going to happen in this process, which was that we were going to have to take out of the current waiver CBAS provisions the things that were related and related only to that transition time from the ADHC program to the new CBAS program. So the document it is actually loaded with those things. I can tell you, as somebody who's been spending the last few weeks editing it, there's a lot of information that was relating to that time, including, in our view, the enhanced case management piece, which was designed to take those people who were in the ADHC program back in March of 2012, who were found to be ineligible and who needed some additional assistance to transition out, and because they didn't make it into CBAS, we had that ECM provision, enhanced case management, and that was one big piece of that, and a lot of reporting and things around that piece. So that was recommendation number one, top of the list. It wasn't a top priority, but that was the top one there on the board. Number two there, continue access monitoring and streamline reporting requirements to CMS. Right now, in the current approved version of the waiver, the reporting requirements are scattered throughout the document. And what we talked about as we reviewed together as a work group was the need to sort of consolidate those all under a certain section, and also to align the reporting requirements with the current reporting requirements in the larger waiver. And so that was one of the things that we decided needed to be done. I want to also, at this point, if I could, just take a quick moment to just plug another thing that we did that was related to this. The idea of access monitoring and access and ensuring access was a major subject of our discussions. And as part of that, CDA took some of the data that we have at our fingertips, and we put it up on the website to address the need that clearly was expressed during the stakeholder process that we have. Others have access to that information as well. So I want to make a quick plug for, if you haven't seen on the CDA website, if you go to the CBAS tab, and this is the CBAS dashboard, it shows a lot of information about what's happening on a monthly basis, on an annual basis, about what's happening with the centers and the participants. Actually, could you just go back one real quick minute? Some of you have seen these before, but I just want to highlight under center overview really quickly. That there's summary data here from January 2014. This is data that the providers give to us regarding the number of participants served, whether they're Medi-Cal eligible or private pay, because we do have ADHC individuals that are still served in the ADHC centers and CBAS programs, so those numbers are there as well. Newly eligible, sort of the flow in and out, discharged individuals on a monthly basis. And then there's also a button there. We won't click it now because it takes a little while to load, but if you click that button right there about detail on the CBAS centers, it'll show you the data that supports these summary numbers. So if you want to look at data on a regional basis, I know that the plans are often asking CDA to give us this data. Now a lot of it's available at your fingertips. So just want to do a quick plug for that because it is related to what we talked about under the discussion about access monitoring and reporting. If we can go back now to the slides, I'm running through these things quickly. We have create a new STC /SOP. Those are special terms and conditions, standards of participation. The work group wanted a new section that provided some more in-depth information about the plan and provider relationships. And so that's something that we have been working on, where we have in the STCs a little greater detail clarifying things like what's the plan's responsibilities with regards to contracting with CBAS providers, with ensuring quality of their contracted providers, with turning around eligibility determination requests, all of those things, and collaboration and communication with care planning. So we've been working on creating new information in the waiver documents that support that greater level of detail that the work group asked for. The next bullet there is retain language for fee-for-service grievances and appeals. We recognize that there continue to be people who, even though this is a managed care benefit and it's largely in the managed care arena now, that there are continue to be fee-for-service individuals served in the program, and that there was language that needed to be retained in the STCs around the fee-for-service individuals. Next slide. And I know I'm talking fast, so the work group members, when I'm all done, you can jump in and talk about this, or you can stop me as I go. Allow plan discretion regarding conducting face-to-face eligibility determinations for individuals clinically appropriate. So this was a very important topic that we covered, that there's a need to have, in some cases, expedited enrollment into CBAS programs, that the plans need the flexibility to be able to do that, and that the beneficiaries need those kinds of protections and quick access. So building into this waiver the provisions for a plan, something in their policies and procedures, something that describes how they will handle expedited enrollment that would include not doing a face-to-face in certain cases. The next bullet is allowing authorization for up to 12 months as determined, again, by the plan to be clinically appropriate. So the plan to develop policies and procedures that specify under what circumstances they would allow a 12-month authorization for services. And I want to put in a quick just footnote to that one, that being that for CBAS providers who are listening in, that doesn't change your program requirements for doing your multidisciplinary team assessments, your every 6-month review, and renewal of your, or redoing of your individual plans of care. It specifically deals with authorization for an extended period of time at the plan's discretion. The next bullet is to a suggestion that many of us have known there was a great deal of desire for, and that is a redesigned individual plan of care form. So that kind of goes beyond the waiver to sort of the future efforts. It doubles up with that issue. But we also wanted to add some language into the waiver documents that reflected the need for the plan and provider collaboration on the individual plan of care. So, care planning at the managed care plan level has to be done, and care planning at the CBAS center level has to be done. There needs to be some coordination of that so that they are complementary. So we had lots of discussion about that. Including references in the waiver regarding care coordination. There was a sentiment, I think specifically among the providers, that the care coordination role that you all play was not appropriately described in the waiver documents. So care coordination being included in the language around describing the basic benefits was one of the requests. The next slide. We had a request to correct some of the language regarding CBAS benefits, and I'll say at this point that I think that at the time that we crafted the original CBAS provisions in the waiver, we were all in a bit of a hurry, and there were some things that might have gotten just somewhat askew in some of the language, the original language, and so we certainly all noticed that, and we are going back to correct some of the way that the CBAS program is described. We got a lot of suggestions from the work group about that. The next bullet is regarding allowing planned growth of new CBAS centers. Again, this overlaps with sort of future initiatives going forward, but during the process of the stakeholder discussions, it occurred to all of us not only the need for looking at planned and reasonable growth where there is underserved and unserved areas in the state, but also looking at the fact that come September of 2014, upon the expiration of the current waiver provisions and the current settlement agreement, that there would really be nothing in place that would restrict that. So we need to develop a process for how we will have applications going forward, how we will ensure that there is, in fact, need for services, the managed care plans that would be contracting for services in areas as appropriate, that they would be in some kind of a process in the loop to ensure that they were wanting to contract for additional services, et cetera. So that's a process that we need to look at going forward. Retaining unbundled services was one of the items that was specifically called out by the work group that they wanted us to do. And I'd say on this item, we put in the document that summarizes these issues, and we've stated our intent all along that we consider the unbundled services to be part of the ADHC-to-CBAS transition and have the expectation of deleting it. So that's one of the work group recommendations, however. Revise the waiver of quality assurance requirements, again, to bring some of the quality assurance requirements that are in place for the entire waiver, the entire 1115 waiver, not just the CBAS portions, to bring those into sync. And then also the work group had expressed the desire to get involved in developing some new quality measures, quality metrics going forward. So I think that this, John, is a good opportunity to talk about how the waiver is a living document, and this is not our only opportunity to change it, and that as we look forward in the future, there will be opportunities. The entire waiver will be renewed in November of 2015. So this renewal or amendment to the CBAS portion to ensure the program continues in 2014 is not our last opportunity to do things. So as we look forward to future initiatives, working on quality assurance metrics that stakeholders believe need to be in place, that's one of the things that we'll do. Did you?
No, that's absolutely correct. That's not,
okay.
Nothing more I need to add.
Got it. Okay. And then there was a great deal of discussion about rates and how rates intersect with access, how rates intersect with issues around sort of payment, reasonable payment for acuity levels that vary among the beneficiaries. There was discussion about the current 10% rate reduction and how that affects providers, and the need for some different kind of rate methodology. So there was a great deal of discussion around that, much of which we said we would be wanting to work on as well, but that many of the subjects that came up were beyond the sort of discussions of the waiver. And next slide. There was a request for more clarification regarding requirements in the waiver that specified that these requirements that are specified in the STCs and SOPs have statutory, state statute references and regulatory references. There was a good deal of discussion around the provisions for nonprofit providers, meaning that the provisions in the standards of participation, which currently say that at some point in time there will be a policy to convert the provider community from allowing for-profits to having an all nonprofit provider community with certain exceptions specified, and there was a great deal of concurrence that we needed to delete those provisions going forward. There was discussion about giving CDA authority to grant program flexibility. The program flexibility that resides right now with the licensing program, with the Department of Public Health, and with the licensing statutes. And also the subject of flexibility on a much larger level as to the need for this CBAS model to be able to grow and adapt and be flexible in how you all as providers go forward in your relationships with managed care. So lots of discussion about program flexibility and recommendations around that coming out of the work group. There was discussion about the situations that arise around the 4-hour required day of attendance for reimbursement and circumstances including things like natural disasters and unplanned events that require less than a 4-hour day, and how could we look at reimbursement for that? And we indicated that was something that we would need to be looking at after this waiver amendment. that there were lots of considerations around that, and that wasn't going to be something that we were able to do at this time. Revising this SOP language regarding staffing and average daily attendance. We actually had some folks on the work group actually put together some language and put it forward that we've been working with and getting into the draft. So we had some specific language that people wanted to put forward. And on that note, we will talk later on in the webinar about how others can still put forward some suggestions and give us some specific language if they have desire to do so. So that's the really fast thumbnail sketch of what the work group put forward. Bobbie?
So Denise, this might be a good time to hear from some of the work group members who helped craft these recommendations. And I'd like to go back to Lydia, Celine, Pam, and Nina and just see if you all have any comments that you'd like to make about this set of recommendations. And then we'll take a few minutes after the comments to summarize the future efforts. Lydia, would you like to go first?
Oh, hi, Bobbie. Sure. I think for me personally, what Denise articulated as the priorities going into this round of waiver amendments are certainly important from where I sit and what I hear from our providers. But we are a little bit disappointed that, there's not enough time to really dig in and address some of the issues that are on the futures list, because some of them are really critical to access and to the future viability of some of our centers. So we understand the time constraints. We're happy to hear that there will be an opportunity to revisit these things for the November 2015 amendments. So I think that means we can roll up our sleeves pretty quickly after the August deadline and get an early start on those changes. I personally felt very pleased that the list of immediate waiver changes coincide with, as I said earlier, the priorities I'm hearing from our membership, other than the rate issue. And I know there's concern about the moratorium being lifted, so I'm eager to start working with our colleagues and with you all to start to map out what that managed growth process might look like. So that and the flexibility issue, we heard a lot about that from the plans as well as from the providers, I think are, for me personally, my top 3 areas that I really want to start digging in on.
Great. Thank you, Lydia. Nina, would you have anything to add?
I'm sorry, I had to unmute.
That's okay.
I absolutely. I think that CDA did a great job of outlining the top issues, and I want to mirror what Lydia said, that I think I'm a little disappointed that we have to postpone some of these things, but excited that they're still at the forefront of what needs to come next. And so I'm actually excited about a couple of things, and one of them is being a CBAS provider, working with the plans, that moving forward that the CBAS providers have more guidance in working with the plans in coordinating care better, so that we can provide them the information that they need and that they want, and vice versa, so that we actually have a collaboration and coordinated care moving forward. And obviously, finally, as a for-profit provider, I'm excited about deleting the nonprofit provider provision.
Great. Thank you, Nina, for your comments. Celine, did you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I think this really reflects the scope of what we talked about, which was which was broad and excited. I mean, there's still work to flesh some of these out, but the access issues were huge, and so looking at expedited enrollment and fleshing that out, coming up with some of those specific policies and procedures, and then you know, we were part of the conversation about the staffing and the ADA, and you know, again, these processes happen after the settlement. They happened really quickly, so I think that we'll have some better language and ways to apply these in a more standardized way. And I'm just excited about the, you know, the communication and quality and standardization focus that we're going to have moving forward as well.
Great. And Pam, did you have anything more you wanted to add here about the recommendations?
No, I was looking down through them, and I think this is, you know, a robust set of, you know, items to try to tackle. And I would echo the previous speakers that, you know, the big thing for the plans is, you know, flexibility, and also improved communication and collaboration. So I think we're all on the same page, the centers and the plans with regard to those things, and we've got a lot of change that is happening very, very quickly, and you know that we need to just lock arms and work together to try to give the best possible care to the beneficiaries. So we, again, appreciate being part of the process and look forward to the future together.
Thanks, Pam. At this point, I want to see if any of the other work group members who are on the call have anything they'd like to add about the development of the recommendations and the recommendations themselves. So members of the stakeholder work group that haven't spoken, that are on the call, any of you would like to make any comments at this point?
We're opening up the lines right now, Bob.
Okay, thanks, Denise.
And Bobbie, once our other work group colleagues have a chance to speak, I did have one other thought I wanted to share.
Well, Lydia, why don't you go ahead while we're opening up the lines? It might take just a second. Why don't you go ahead and make your comment, and then we'll see if anyone else would like to comment from the work group.
Oh, sure. And this is kind of big picture, but what really struck me during all of these conversations, and I mean, I wish we could continue these going forward. Probably that's not what CDA staff and DHCS staff want to hear, but I mean, it really was productive. But one of the things that really struck me was there's going to be this constant tension going forward now between having some statewide policies and standardization of forms and so on compared to local flexibility and experimentation. And I think that when Pam made that comment about flexibility, which I'm also very supportive about, there's going to constantly be this balancing act and this tension, and that's the balance that we'll need to work on together going forward, so that a person who has a CBAS benefit in San Diego County is going to look fairly similar to a person who has a CBAS benefit in Butte County, for example. So I just wanted to put that out there so that as we look at the STCs as they're released and the standards of participation, that we'll be wanting to keep that in mind to review and give you feedback.
Very good point, Lydia. Thank you. And let's see, any other members of the stakeholder work group whose lines are now unmuted would like to make any comments about the recommendations that came out of the work group, or any comments about the work group in general, before we go on to talk about the future efforts?
I think, Burge, you had your hand up. Are you able to speak now? So several people had their hands up and we opened their mics.
Yeah, I see. Well, we'll come back to the work group members again in a few minutes, and if you have comments, members of the work group, we'd love for you to make them. Denise and Jeannie, why don't we just spend a few minutes on what the issues are that were identified by the work group that need additional work, and where the Department of Healthcare Services and the California Department of Aging are going to consider forming additional work groups or focused discussions on a number of issues here.
So I'll start and then I'll kick it to Jeannie. So I think that we shared during the last work group meeting. We got some feedback here, so let's close off the mics again.
Yeah, we're definitely getting feedback.
That's the hazard of try it again. Okay, that sounds good. So I think we shared this at the last work group meeting, and that is that our first priority is to get the draft waiver amendment launched. So that's the very first thing we're thinking about, even though there's all kinds of great things that we have on this future list and that we want to get started on. So as far as that goes, I think going into the next few months, something certainly less structured than work group activities that we've been engaged in now, where we can have conversations and start fleshing out ideas, maybe have some conference calls with interested participants. That's certainly, I think, on our agenda for these subjects. So, but first and only priority really is to launch the waiver amendment. So, and then some of the subjects up on this slide that the work group put forward for future efforts: redesigning the individual plan of care. I think there was uniform agreement that was something that needed to happen, and especially keeping in mind from the plans and the provider's perspective what needs to happen to make those the plans requirements with regards to the care planning and the CBAS providers come into a better alignment. So that's definitely a work group kind of effort and discussion going forward. Exploring issues with data capture and utilization, this subject near and dear to my heart. We've been doing a lot of work here at CDA on better data capture and sharing it. And so, and there was a lot expressed during the work group about the need for, as Lydia mentioned, standardizing the forms so we have standard data fields, and finding ways to gather data and use it better in describing the program and in driving quality in the program, in monitoring the program, all sorts of things. Developing a quality strategy, again, I mentioned that earlier as it related to the waiver itself, but going forward, developing some new quality metrics so that we can identify what it looks like when CBAS is done in a best practice sort of fashion, and the things that are going on in the industry that we want to replicate, celebrate, etc. So developing a better quality strategy is something that a work group could set about getting engaged in. Address issues with CBAS rate. Again, Lydia spoke to that, but that's obviously a priority for providers, and that's something that needs further fleshing out. Reforming ADHC statutes and regulations. I think many of us know how old those are and how out of alignment they now are with where we are in the program. So that's definitely something that's a future effort when we get through some of the more immediate things. Addressing access and developing a plan, a process for growth of new CBAS centers. Access was a major subject, as Celine mentioned, and we know that we're going to have the need to establish some kind of a policy and process for how bringing new CBAS centers online would work, and so that's something that some fairly immediate attention needs to be given. Developing strategies for enhancing plan and provider relationships. I think we already have started on a lot of that effort, but continuing to find ways to do training, as Lydia's CADS group has been gotten ahead of all of us on, and finding ways for all of us to work better in the environment. God bless you, whoever that was. Okay, so that was sort of the summary, but definitely would want the work group members who are on the call to participate in sharing about their future efforts, ideas.
Thanks, Denise. Jeannie, anything you want to add?
No, I think that Denise has covered it nicely, and I think her voice usually carries much better than mine.
Oh, you're of like mind.
So let me just stop here and see if Lydia, if you or Celine or Nina have any feedback about these future issues and initiatives that really are important and need to be undertaken. Anything you want to add to what Denise and Jeannie have said?
Lydia. I think that was a really fast and great summary. There's obviously a lot of meat behind each of those statements. We've got a lot of work to do, but I'm very excited. I know that word's been used several times during the webinar, but I think it is true that as we work more closely with the plans, as we have these conversations with the state colleagues, that we can see a path forward that really is going to be very positive for the beneficiaries who need these services. So I'm just expecting that we're going to continue really digging in once we get these STCs put to bed with the state, with the CMS and the state. And I know from CADS, we have a commitment to you to work equally as hard as we have during the stakeholder process going forward. I note that Berge was having some challenges with the sound, and he wrote a note that he does agree with the comments made by the other stakeholders and agrees that we'd like to continue to work with plans to make a better effort in working together in development of procedures and rules, so they're not being created in a vacuum. I just wanted to make that comment on behalf of Berge.
Yes, thank you, Lydia. I was going to do that if you didn't, so thanks for doing that. And Berge, thanks for your comment. Anybody else, Celine or Nina, anything you'd like to say about these future initiatives that the work group recommended moving forward on?
Well, I think this is the list, and I think the exciting part is the ongoing collaboration with the plans, and that we've been trying to address standardization and quality for a number of years, but for the first time I feel like we're going to finally have the resources with the collaboration of plans to have access to data, and that we're kind of all on the same page with the need to do that so that we can show the outcomes of the CBAS model.
Great. Nina, anything else?
No, I concur with both Lydia and Celine.
Great. And Pam, what about you from the health plan perspective?
Well, I'm hopeful that we're going to continue this dialogue as well. We're, in this together for the long haul, and this is a great first step in improving communications and policies and procedures. So Care First is, grateful to be a part of this, and, open to any and all ideas for collaboration going forward.
Great. Any other members of the work group that are participating on the webinar? Anyone else have anything they'd like to add about the future initiatives that have been identified by the work group and the future work that still is to be done?
So Bobbie, James had his hand up from LA Care, and we're...
Oh, good. Great. James, can you, can we hear you? James Kamakami from LA Care?
Maybe we can have James type it in.
Okay, yeah, I think so. James, if you want to type in your comment in the comment box, we'll read it to everyone like we read Burgess.
Yes. It's Dr. Carter from LA Care, and she'd like to make a comment via James, but I guess we're not able to connect with the microphone.
Okay. Well, that would be great to hear from both Dr. Carter and James. So, James, if you can, oh, maybe now. James, can you, can we hear you?
Bobbie, can you hear me?
Yes. Is that Trudy? Hi.
Yes.
Even
Hi,
better.
how are you doing?
Good. This is Dr. Trudy Carter, everyone, from the Chief Medical Officer at LA Care, who participated in the work group meetings also. Go ahead, Trudy.
I just wanted to make a couple of comments, Bobbie, that
Please.
The excitement for me was not only in working with this work group, was not only looking at CBAS as an isolated entity, but more that working with the work group to work on where CBAS was going to eventually sit in the whole care continuum. With all the changes that are coming around with just in this year alone with the LTSS services and with the changing responsibilities, it was very exciting to work with people who could see that CBAS could be more than it currently is, and to explore with the various stakeholders on what the future could ultimately hold. And I think we were able to really talk about care delivery from the member's perspective and not from the isolated stakeholder delivery perspective. And that was very exciting to me.
Thank you, Trudy, for your comments, and thanks so much for taking time to participate in the process. Okay, well, let's move on now to review the waiver amendment process and the timeline going forward. So there's a very complicated set of next steps that the Department of Healthcare Services and CDA will be going through with the federal government to look at the special terms and conditions. And so I'm going to ask Denise and Denise Peach from CDA and Jeannie Smalley from DHCS to walk us through the timeline and what's ahead of us now, because they'll be an important piece of this for all stakeholders. So if we can move on to the next slide, and then Denise and Jeannie, if you want to walk us through the timeline, that'd be great.
Okay, Bobbie, and as everyone has known, that we started this process back a few months ago with conversations beginning with CMS, letting them know that we were going to amend the waiver. And we started with the work groups back in October, looking at what changes wanted to be made and everything. So as of March of this year, we did go ahead and we put up for the tribal notification, and we did get a waiver on that because we really are not changing any of the CBAS benefits. So we got a waiver from CMS on that tribal notification, so that's been completed. Now we're working on our draft amendments. As Denise had mentioned, we've been going forward with that for quite some time, working fast and furiously, incorporating comments that we've gotten from the work group as well. Did you want to talk about
This is Ed. So where we are right now in terms of the draft CBAS waiver amendment is that we were hoping that we'd have the draft STCs and SOPs to share with you after this webinar today so that we could begin a brief comment period. As many of you know, Toby Douglas at the last Olmstead Advisory Committee meeting suggested that he would provide for a comment period for the draft STCs and SOPs. The draft has been drafted. It's still going through internal review at this point. So we, unfortunately, we know it. We were hoping to do the big reveal today, but we hope to do so soon. There's some more internal review that needs to take place. We will be releasing the draft SOPs and STCs for review. Denise will talk about that process later, but they are still under review and we can't post them today.
Okay, so right now we have our administrative review going on through April and rolling into May. You want to talk about the comment?
I'll go to the comment period just after you finish the time.
Okay. And then we're hoping to have discussions with CMS. They have a request for more information that goes back and forth between CMS and the Department of Healthcare Services and Department of Aging, working out any changes or questions that they have. And we hope to have everything settled by the end of August so that the waiver will be amended and ready to go as of September 1. So that's our timeline. It's you know, sometimes it seems like August is a long way away, and sometimes it seems like it's right around the corner. So we're working on that daily. Hourly. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about the comment process that Jeannie was identifying there on the timeline. So we had anticipated, as Ed said, getting that started tomorrow, but that's we were a little bit ambitious, but we are expecting to get it started imminently. So we're saying 7 calendar days is what we're going to have for a comment period in April. And what I want to do now, because in just sort of a general overview, what we want to do on this expedited timeline is make sure that we give stakeholders one more crack at input before we send anything off to CMS, and we want to make sure that that input it comes to us in a way that's manageable and something that we can manage in a fairly expedited fashion. So we've developed a Survey Monkey. Many of you are familiar with this. I know all the CAD providers are, because Lydia is doing Survey Monkey things all the time. So many of you are familiar with this format. We just did one for our participant characteristics report, and it's going to be a good format, we think, for getting your input and being able to compile it. So I want to just do a quick walkthrough. We were intending to have this up on the website today to show you, but we'll just walk through what the mock-up looks like of this Survey Monkey. So right now, for those of you, let me just start with this. If you're not on the distribution list for stakeholders for CBAS, you should consider adding your name to it. You go to the CDA website and grab the stakeholder button, and you can sign up. There's the sign up right there, and this is the page you will land on if you are going to the stakeholders website and looking at information here at CDA. So there's going to be a new landing spot on that website, and that's that top one where it says New Page, and it's going to say Draft CBAS Waiver Amendment and Public Comment Process. You'll click on that, and it's going to land you on a new page where it provides you some information. There's background information for those of you who have not been following along the blow-by-blow of how we're running this process, and if you hover over that more right there by background, it'll bring up some information that we're looking at right here, and that information basically overviews what this process is about, what the public comment process is going to be about, how it's going to work, where to find documents. And you can just stay right there for a moment. I want to say there's some important information, I think, here that catalogs sort of some of the rationale for some of the changes. So there's a lot of reasons that, again, the work group are familiar with as to why we've made changes, but we're sort of outlining them here. That there are many things that you will see in these documents that are changed because we have, under number 1, we've aligned the statutory and regulatory language and Medi-Cal policy with things that are in the waiver, or that we've revised because the stakeholder work group has recommended, or that we've deleted since they're no longer relevant to the transition. We've moved things around to and from different sections to have the organization of the document make more sense, or we've done just sort of clarifying or cleanup language, including grammatical corrections to things, or that we're actually aligning both the special terms and conditions and the standards of participation. So that's sort of an overview of why some of the changes were made, so people understand that as you look at the document. And then there's a little bit more information about how to work through this public comment period. I want to also just note there that we've got that it's a very short timeline between the public comment period and when we're going to submit the waiver draft waiver document to CMS. So we're wanting to make sure that you all understand that, and that's why we're doing this process with this Survey Monkey, and we think it's going to help us keep this thing more manageable. And then we're also going to be continuing to keep everybody apprised as to what's happening on a sort of monthly basis with updates on the stakeholder page. So do and do the distribution list. So do join the distribution list if you're not there yet. So also on that page, again, it will give you links to where the currently approved documents are, the CMS approved STCs and SOPs, and the draft versions so that you can look at them as you get ready to fill out the comment log if you have specific comments. So we can take a look just really quick just to show you what this document's going to look like. It will allow you to, first of all, it opens up with some instructions about how to fill out the form. We're asking you to identify numbers and page numbers to help us for reference. We're going to allow you to have, we're going to request that you add, if you have specific language to give us, suggestion-wise, that you give us that language so that we don't have to read through long narrative notes and try to figure out what you're asking for. If you want something specific, suggest it, and then you'll get an opportunity to put comments in that clarify it if you would like. So that's some sort of the instruction page on this SurveyMonkey, and from there, name and email address and phone number optional. But if we have questions, that will help us to contact you. And then the survey is very simple. Do you have something to comment on or a proposed revision to the STCs? Yes or no? If it's yes, you're going to fill it out. And we also sort of add some clarification there. So if you get to the end of a box, you've got 600 characters to use. And if you need more space, there's a general box down below that you can drop some additional information in. Or you can comment in the comment section there. So again, this we hope will help keep things very organized with an STC number and a page number, proposed specific revision, and any comments on it, and a little bit of overflow down below to put additional information. And then there's the SOP, and you get an opportunity to put things in there. I think we've also put somewhere in the instructions that if you feel like you have so much to say and you cannot fit it into this SurveyMonkey, that we're asking you to call us and we'll give you some additional guidance on how to give us information. What we want to avoid is really, again, long narrative letters and notes that are hard for us to sort through on a very expedient basis. So that's what we've developed, and that will be posted on the website. We'll send a notice to the distribution list when the public comment period begins, so everybody knows that it's time and that the calendar, the 7 calendar days are starting. So we'll do that ahead of time and refer you to the survey for you to take and provide feedback if you have it. So that's the overview.
Great, thanks, Denise. And Jeannie, anything else on the timeline before we take a question from one of our stakeholder work group members?
No, I think just know that we'll be having open discussions with CMS that will be ongoing. So as well as our administration between the two departments, making sure that this goes through in a timely basis.
Great. Thank you. So we've got a question from Robert McLaughlin, who's on the stakeholder work group, directed to Ed. And Robert's question, Ed, is what is the nature of the delay and when will the STCs be available? Would you like to respond to Robert's question, please?
Hi, Robert. So the nature of the delay is simply that we need to go through a review process. Our staff have been working 24/7, pretty much, to get these the drafts, STCs and SOPs done. The draft was completed, I think, the day before yesterday. So it's just a case of the administration needing a little more time to review. We're hopeful that we will be able to release the draft SOPs and STCs for public comment in April, but I can't give you a specific date at this point in time.
And this is John Shen from Department of Healthcare Services. Basically, we are going through legal review, and we're going to make sure the language is appropriate in STC so that it fits into the usual communications that we have with CMS on those languages, so that we don't want to make sure that we don't confuse CMS on some of those ideas and terms and conditions. So I think we're basically going through those very careful process. Both the legal folks are looking at it, as well as our folks who do the 1115 waiver application that need to maintain the integrity of the entire 1115, which is basically a lot of the different programs are in the 1115, and so we are trying to fit all those things in and to make sure the application integrity is in place. So we are basically going through those kind of process, and of course our leadership has to review those kind of materials. CBA as well as DHCS has to look at the materials, and we need to answer their questions.
Thank you, John. So we also have a question from Lydia, who also is a member of the Stakeholder Work Group, which I'm going to read in 1 second. I just want to now encourage any members, any individuals who are listening to this webinar who have comments about the content of the webinar, the process of the work group, or the recommendations, or any questions. This would be a good time to type your questions in, and we can address them during the comment period, which we're entering now. And any members of the Stakeholder Work Group should do the same. So Lydia had a question. Just in case more time is needed, can CMS extend the current waiver past August 31st temporarily?
I think what we want, this is John from Department of Healthcare Services. I think what we want is that we want to hit that timeline of submission as timely as possible. CMS continuously works with us on 1115 waiver, so there's a lot of give and takes, okay? But I really want to focus on able to get this document completed, published for public comment, and then we get on our activity of submission to CMS and begin that conversation with CMS. So we really want to focus on hitting the target, but CMS always works with us with many, many waivers, many waiver issues. We do have give and takes between CMS and us on those dates, but we do not anticipate any scenario in which there's no payment for CBAS after end of August 2014. So we don't anticipate that scenario at all.
Good. Okay, any other comments or questions from either members of the Stakeholder Work Group or other members of the community that are listening or participating on the webinar today? Please type those in, and we'll read your question and then have one of the state staff or one of the stakeholder members comment on your question. So let's just pause for a minute and see if there are, if we receive any questions or comments in addition to the ones we've already received. So we're just going to have a little silence for a moment while we wait for any questions to come in, and if none come in, then we will proceed to talk about the next steps and then adjourn the webinar. So let's just give everyone just a minute to think about any questions or comments they'd like to make.
And Bobbie, I think we have opened up the lines for the other work group members as well, if they want to jump on, if we can hear them, that'd be great. Good. That'd be great. If any of the work group members want to comment verbally and we can hear you, that would be great. So here is a question and a comment from one of the Stakeholder Work Group members, which says, given that the stakeholders have participated in good faith, can we get some assurance that the STCs will be processed and made available for comment before May? The timeline sounds vague. So John and Ed, I think that is a question and a comment for you to respond to, please.
So from my perspective, we are working in with our administration to ensure the review happens quickly as it can. As I said earlier, our intent and hope is to get it out in April with sufficient time for a 7-calendar-day comment. I can't really say anything further than that, but we're working in good faith sure to the degree we can that there will be an April release and comment period so that we can receive your input.
Thank you, Ed. We have another comment from Lydia. SurveyMonkey is a great idea given the short timeline. Will the submission to CMS be released to the public after the public comment period?
The expectation is that the comment period precedes the CMS draft release, yes.
So the answer is yes. The comment period will happen, and then the release will occur.
Yeah.
Of the final draft, I guess. I think most of you know, and it was said as we talked through the timeline, that there is an iterative process that goes on between the state and CMS to finalize the waiver terms and conditions. And Lydia's asking, and we will see the final draft. That's a question. So Denise, you want to just review that process, the steps in that process again from the comment period forward?
There's definitely the comment period, and then we need to work out the final document before we submit to CMS, and folks will have a chance to see that final draft, and then we'll submit to CMS.
Yeah, I'd emphasize that we want to be careful with the terminology final, because nothing is final until CMS makes it final. It's
right, so submit a
the draft. Yeah.
The draft we submit to CMS.
The draft we submit to CMS, and then after CMS we receive that, they will have time period to review it, and there will be comment, and there will be modification, there will be change. In that process, we definitely will want to engage the work group so that they know what the changes are being made, and people can understand that process. And then when CMS approves, then there will be the final approval. Final approval. Thank you.
Okay. So I think that concludes the comments that people have. And again, you can...
Viviana had wanted to make a comment.
Oh, great. That'd be wonderful. Viviana?
Yes. Good afternoon. This is Viviana Criado with the California Elder Mental Health and Aging Coalition. I want to thank not only CDA, but all the work groups for the opportunity to join the effort and contribute to see that the waiver is updated. I have to share with you that my experience has been primarily within the mental health arena, but I have to say that I'm very, very impressed by the stakeholder process that we were part. I already have complemented this process in other venues, and it's my hope that other departments learn from this process. To support and to ensure that CDA continues in this vein, I would like to encourage the Department of Health Services to proceed expeditiously reviewing the draft and posting it as soon as possible. I also would like to suggest that rather than 1 week, 2 weeks are provided for public input. Thank you once again, and I would like to reiterate my commitment to working with this group, particularly as you move forward developing outcomes and data collection efforts. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Viviana, for those kind words. Okay, any other comments that anyone wanted to make?
I have a few written comments.
Okay, Jeannie, that would be great. We'd love to hear them.
We have a few people that submitted several comments. One comment is what are the chances of the new STC and SOP of getting disapproved by CMS, and are we running out of time? Will there be any interruption of services?
Again, I think in the many, in the experience of Department of Health Services working in CMS, definitely both the department as well as CMS do have the beneficiary in our mind, when we work through those processes, continuity of care is a very important concept for all of us. And so we do not anticipate a scenario in which there will be discontinuation of services. So definitely there will be technical issues that we need to work through with CMS, but we believe in all our situations in the past, we have worked through those kind of issues. And this is particularly about an existing service. It's not something that is brand new. So this is, again, a scenario that we do not anticipate and is extremely unlikely.
Thank you, John, for that answer, and thanks for the question. Jeannie, did you have another comment you wanted to?
Another question. It is our understanding that CMS intends to apply the new HCBS Home and Community-Based Services regulations that were issued in January broadly, including possibly to CBAS. What impact will those new rules have here in California, in particular the new community character and independent assessment requirements?
This is John Chen from Department of Healthcare Services. We are definitely very watchful for all the guidance that are coming from CMS regarding the HCBS final rules. It does affect a lot of the waiver program, and we are assessing the impact of the waiver program. Regarding community-based settings, a lot of those are more related to the 1915C waiver, 1915I, and 1915K. We are still waiting for guidance from CMS regarding outpatient setting, what they consider to be community-based. And I want to defer to Ed, because Ed is also very involved in that process, talking about definitely try to understand CMS standpoint on outpatient setting like the CBAS centers.
So again, when CDA and the National Association of State Units United for Aging and Disabilities reviewed the rule, we didn't have any concerns with the language in the rule having to do with HCBS. One of the things that the rule addresses is the qualities of community-based settings. And one of the qualities of a community-based setting is that a community-based setting supports integration in the community. Our concern has been with things that we have heard only verbally from some individuals within CMS regarding how strict they will be in their interpretation of the word integration. And at this point in time, the National Association for States United for Aging and Disability, the National Alzheimer's Association, the National Adult Day Services Association, and others are communicating their concerns about interpretation to CMS so that the guidance that is issued will not really impact ADHC/CBAS settings in a detrimental way. We haven't heard anything further at this point, so at this point in time, we're just watching what comes out of CMS and working with our state and national partners to message appropriately.
This is John again, and let me just add that the CMS final rule really emphasized consumer choice, okay, in terms of the preference of the individual, the choice of the individuals, and how those choices are reflected in the care plan or service plan that we develop for those individuals. So those are all very good improvement in our home and community-based service systems. So it's really not so much about licensing or physical facility per se. It's more about how do we make sure that we reflect that the consumer's desires and preferences and choice are reflected in our actual provision of care to those individuals. And so those are really the focus for those people who are not close to the final rule, but that's sort of like the general gist of it.
Thanks.
Thank you, John and Ed. That was very helpful. Jeannie, any other comments?
Yeah. We share others' concerns about the need to preserve and in the long term raise the current rate floor after the settlement agreement expires. Still not quite clear about what will and will not be addressed in the waiver, and would appreciate a more detailed explanation of this. How will the state ensure adequate funding to prevent an erosion of access and quality of service? Will the waiver renewal include statewide minimum protections in areas like managed care contracting, service authorization and planning, and discharge planning and reporting? We recommend these protections be developed and preserved.
I think those are comments that we have heard from the recommendation of the work group, and we are taking those comments into consideration and begin to work this with the STC.
Another one is, when will we know what happens?
As one of the things that Denise mentioned earlier during the webinar is that we are planning to give you high-level updates on the progress on the waiver amendment as it moves through us to CMS, you know, just a status update. So once we know that CMS has approved the waiver amendment, you will know that CMS has approved the waiver amendment, and we hope that that will be in August.
And just to piggyback on that, we had a few people asking about if they'll have notes or transcripts or anything on this presentation where that can be found. And like Ed and Denise have mentioned previously, the CDA website continues to have that link and information on all of the past meetings, and we'll have this one posted as well at aging.ca.gov.
And there's a slide at the end of this presentation that shows where you can access that.
So basically that's all the questions, Bobbie.
Great. Okay, let's see. There is another question that was just posted. Let's see if I can. From Mallory. Let's see. So here's Mallory Vega, one of the members of the work group, questions and comments. I'm going to read it, and you all can decide who would be best to answer it. In the process of changing or amending the SOPs and SDCs, there could be unintended or unforeseen consequences or policies or procedures that are discovered not to work or work against the provider, member, or health plan. It was stated that the next time this waiver will be reviewed is late 2015. Are there avenues for resolving these unanticipated problems should they occur quickly?
We say earlier the 1115 waiver document is a living document agreement between the state of California and CMS. And so if there's something that is dramatically impact on beneficiaries, that say unintended consequences, it behooves us to basically make those corrections and make those changes, and we'll work with CMS for those kind of changes.
Thank you, John. And thanks, Mallory, for that question. That's an important issue. Okay, it sounds like we've come to the end of our comment period and the end of the comments so far. And I want to remind you all again that we'll put up on the screen the CDA-CBAS address where you can send additional comments as they come up, as you think of them in the coming weeks. Denise, it would be great, I think, if you and Jeannie would just summarize the next steps, where we're heading, and then we'll bring the webinar to a close.
Okay, I think Jean's still getting some questions, and we might have a few more stragglers, but some of the things that we're doing here, as we have been doing since the beginning of the stakeholder process, once we convene, once we complete a meeting, we post the webinar recording on the CDA website, the stakeholder webpage, and that'll be under the meetings date for today. So if somebody wanted to re-listen to it, or somebody didn't, if somebody missed it, they could listen to it there. So we'll do the postings. We will also update the stakeholder input log. After each of our meetings, we have been keeping a compiled list of all the stakeholder input. And so the last time we posted was after the March meeting, and we will post after today's meeting, and that'll include everything that's come in since the March meeting and through today. So we'll post that as well, so anybody who's curious about how anybody else is feeling about things and the things comments are making, they can see that. So we'll do that, and then we are, I'd say from my desk, sitting and waiting for the go-ahead from the rest of the administrative group looking at the waiver amendments. And from there, we're going to get ready to post the documents that we showed you today for the SurveyMonkey to allow for the comment process to begin. We'll send a note to the distribution list and let everybody know that the documents are posted and that they can review them and make comments and how to do the comments. So we get all that information at everybody's fingertips. And then from there, we get into the roll up our sleeves, get all of the changes and tweaks in place, and get the draft off to CMS. And then lots and lots of back and forth, as Jeannie was talking about, that we anticipate happening between May and August to answer CMS's questions and be responsive to what they want us to change. And then, of course, the stakeholders continue giving continued updates, as Ed indicated. Did I get everything? Yes. That's enough, isn't it?
That's enough. Yes, thank you.
And I'd also add that we will be having conversations, as Lydia indicated. There's a lot of things that are a high priority that go beyond the waiver. That as we get the waiver launched and we have more time freed up, we'll start fleshing out some of those ideas and start getting to work on those work group activities as well.
Great.
So, I do have one more question.
Sure.
I was thinking it was more of a comment, but it's, will eligible Darling class members, which are the settlement agreement class members, continue to receive ECM? We recommend that ECM remain as a waiver service given these individuals' current demonstrated need. And I guess I think Denise had addressed this earlier. The majority of beneficiaries that get an ECM from the Darling settlement are those that were not eligible for CBAS. When they become eligible for CBAS, they move out of ECM, as well as the class members that go into managed care, and part of managed care benefit is having that enhanced case management as part of their managed care benefits. So the ECM participants are beginning to get very, very minimal at this point in time, and we see that it will continue that way through the end of August 2014, especially with the rollout of CCI and those counties and those memberships. So we really think that we see this as a very small group of people, if any. But we will take your comment into consideration.
Okay, thank you, Jeannie. So I think we're ready to wrap up the webinar. I'm going to see if Laura Conley is still participating with us as the director of the California Department of Aging. Perhaps she would like to say a few comments. But before she does that, I want to just underscore something that Lydia said at the very beginning when she started making her comments about what a collaborative process I think the stakeholders engaged in amongst themselves and with the two departments. And I think much of that credit goes to not only the members of the stakeholder work group, but to Denise Peach, who you've been hearing from today from the California Department of Aging, and Jeannie Smalley from the Department of Healthcare Services, as well as Ed Long from CDA and John Shen from DHCS. They made this process an easy one to work within and allowed the materials to be available early so that stakeholders could study them and come to the meetings well prepared. So a big thank you to Denise and Jeannie and Ed and John. And Laura, are you still on the webinar? Would you like to say a few words?
Bobbie, yes, I am here in the room. And I would just echo my thoughts immediately kind of went in your direction. We appreciate all the comments from those who have commented during the process here today about the Department of Aging got noted a lot, but I also just want to say, so many of you have been here in person, and so you see the way our offices are laid out, and we have glass conference rooms, and I frequently walk by and see not only Denise and her staff, but Jeannie huddled in the conference room for hours and hours on end as we've been going through this process. So it really, really has been a collaborative process between both departments in terms of staffing this effort. And I just, Bobbie, you have been so instrumental in moving us through this process. I remember the first webinar that we had and looking at the task ahead of us in terms of getting to this goal line. And I have to say, secretly, I said to myself, oh my God. But here we are, and we have done it. And I think I just want to also express our appreciation to everybody who's participated in this process, whether it was one meeting or all meetings. I think it really has been very collegial. We've heard the word excited. Lydia mentioned the word excited earlier in her comments today, but I think it really does take us on a new path in our progress in the evolution of the CBAS program, and it is an exciting one, I think, for all of us. Still lots of hard work ahead. I think a lot of good ideas and issues outside of the waiver have been identified through this process, and both of our departments are very committed to continuing this effort with or without Red Bull as we move forward, but pacing ourselves and continuing to work collaboratively with you as we move forward. So thank you.
Thanks, Laura. And I think on that note, we will end the webinar. And please stay tuned for further updates from the Department of Healthcare Services and from the California Department of Aging. You will be kept informed as the process unfolds. Thanks all of you for joining today, and we look forward to your feedback in the coming weeks.
Oh,